Welcome to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit. Buckle up, because Japan's recent maneuver in the US bond market is sending shockwaves through the global economy, and it's all tied to the escalating trade conflict over electric vehicle tariffs. Washington is facing a financial gut punch as Japan begins offloading US Treasury bonds, a move that could weaken the dollar and destabilize markets worldwide. Is this a calculated power play to pressure the US, or a risky gamble that could backfire spectacularly? Let's break down the key developments. Number 5. The tipping point. Japan dumps US Treasury holdings. Japan, holding over $1.1 trillion in US Treasury bonds, has long been a key pillar of American financial stability. But that relationship is under strain as Japan begins offloading Treasury holdings, a calculated response to escalating trade disputes over electric vehicle EV tariffs. On March 1, 2025, Japan's finance ministry made its stance clear. Given the economic balance, it is in our national interest to diversify our investments. Markets didn't take it well. The Dow Jones dropped for the second day straight, with analysts interpreting Japan's move as a direct warning to Washington. Tokyo seems to be signaling that it won't continue financing US debt while being targeted by protectionist trade policies. Historically, Japan's central bank has been cautious with its foreign reserves, but rising trade barriers and Washington's accusations of unfair EV competition have pushed Japan toward a more aggressive approach. Offloading US bonds could weaken the dollar's position and create financial instability, an economic pressure tactic that shows Japan's growing frustration. Washington fired back quickly. The US Treasury Secretary stressed the importance of trust between allies and warned Japan against destabilizing the global financial system. The tension underscores the fragile nature of the financial and political ties between these two economic powerhouses. But Japan isn't the only country reassessing its financial strategy. Saudi Arabia is making a bold move toward China. Number 4. Trade war escalation, tariffs, and financial leverage. The electric vehicle sector is at the center of this escalating conflict. Japan's dominance in hybrid and EV technology, led by Toyota, Nissan, and Honda, has made it a powerhouse in the global market. In response, the US has imposed protective tariffs to shield American automakers from Japanese competition. Japanese automakers are outraged, calling the tariffs unjustified and protectionist. Tokyo views them as an attack on its economic interests and a violation of free trade principles. Japan's finance minister didn't hold back. If economic interests are clouded by unilateral sanctions, other instruments will come into play. Translation: Japan is ready to use its financial muscle, including selling off US Treasury bonds, to pressure Washington into backing down. The US market is critical for Japanese automakers, but Tokyo seems willing to take short-term economic pain to force a policy change. If Japan follows through with large-scale bond sales, the impact could be severe: rising US interest rates, increased borrowing costs, and market instability. A weakened dollar could also drive up inflation and hurt global investor confidence. Japan's strategy marks a shift from decades of financial caution to a more aggressive stance. Facing mounting trade barriers, Tokyo is signaling that it's no longer willing to play nice in the face of US protectionism. And Washington isn't the only one facing pressure. China is carefully watching how this conflict unfolds. Before we delve deeper, do us a favor and smash that like and subscribe button. This helps us reach more auto enthusiasts just like you. Now let's shift gears and steer towards our next point. Number 3. America's financial weak spot. Japan's move could shake the dollar. The US dollar's status as the world's reserve currency has long been a pillar of American economic power. But Japan holds around 15% of all foreign-owned US debt, a massive financial lever. If Japan offloads even a fraction of its treasury holdings, it could spark higher interest rates and increased borrowing costs across the US economy. A weaker dollar would mean higher import costs, increased inflation, and greater economic uncertainty. And if Japan's move encourages other major bondholders like China to follow suit, the damage could be catastrophic. Reduced demand for U.S. debt would undermine Washington's ability to finance deficits and maintain its economic influence abroad. Japan's central bank has already signaled that it's prepared to use this leverage. The governor of the Bank of Japan recently stated, "Our policy is not aimed at unilateral reserve draining, but we will not leave our hand weak in trade disputes." That's a thinly veiled threat. Japan isn't looking to crash the dollar, but it's not going to sit back while Washington imposes tariffs that hurt its automakers. Tokyo's strategy is calculated but precarious. If it overplays its hand, Japan could find itself dealing with a weaker yen and increased economic instability at home. Meanwhile, South Korea is considering its own financial adjustments in response to growing trade pressures. Number 2, electric vehicles at the center of the storm. The electric vehicle sector has become ground zero in this escalating trade war. The Trump administration's push to boost domestic EV production has led to increased tariffs on Japanese imports, designed to shield American automakers from foreign competition. But Japan holds the upper hand in EV technology. Automakers like Toyota, Nissan, and Honda have invested heavily in hybrid and electric powertrains, gaining a competitive edge in efficiency, range, and production costs. Simply put, Japan's EV industry is ahead of the curve. Washington's strategy to level the playing field could easily backfire. Higher tariffs mean higher EV prices for American consumers, which could slow adoption of green technology and undermine environmental targets. Protecting domestic automakers might come at the cost of slowing EV growth. Japan's response has been strategic, but firm. Automakers are already looking to shift production to Southeast Asia and Mexico, allowing them to bypass tariffs while keeping access to the U.S. market. But the real power play lies in Japan's financial leverage. By selling off U.S. Treasury bonds, Tokyo is signaling that it's ready to apply economic pressure to protect its automotive sector. Japan is making it clear. It won't let U.S. trade barriers threaten its dominance in the EV market. And Japan's strategy isn't lost on Europe. German automakers are now considering similar production shifts to avoid U.S. tariffs. Number 1. Global impact and geopolitical fallout. This economic standoff isn't just about cars and tariffs. It's about global financial dominance. China and South Korea are watching closely, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If Japan successfully pressures Washington into easing tariffs, it could inspire other nations to use financial leverage to push back against U.S. protectionism. A weakened U.S. dollar would shift the balance of power in global financial markets. For decades, the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency has given Washington enormous economic and political leverage. But if Japan's move sparks similar actions from China or Saudi Arabia, the dollar's dominance could slip, creating a more multipolar economic system. The geopolitical fallout could be even more serious. Japan is a key U.S. ally in the Indo-Pacific region, and ongoing trade tensions could weaken strategic cooperation in defense and regional security. If Washington and Tokyo can't find common ground on trade, it could strain their broader diplomatic relationship and open the door for China to expand its influence in the region. And speaking of influence, Russia's economic strategy could shift in response to these growing tensions. Verdict: will Japan's strategy work? Japan's decision to reduce its U.S. Treasury holdings is a game-changing move that could reshape the global economic order. If Japan follows through with large-scale bond sales, the impact could be severe. Rising U.S. interest rates, increased borrowing costs, and market instability. Washington would be forced to decide whether to ease trade barriers or face potential economic fallout. But Japan isn't without risk here. A weaker dollar could make Japanese exports more expensive, hurting its economy in the long run. And if Washington responds with even tougher trade measures, Japan could end up in a worse position than when it started. So, what do you think? Will Japan's financial strategy force Washington to back down, or will the U.S. hold its ground and double down on protectionism? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Piston Pundit for more expert insights and updates on the latest in the automotive world. Thanks for watching and see you next time.